It's a question we ask every year. How has the workload of your in-house agency changed over the past year? 88% said it increased. 88% said it increased. And among that, 67% said it increased a lot. That's a mind-blowing number. Everybody seems to be doing more, more with less. In-house agencies can often do the work faster and cheaper.
Welcome to the premiere episode of the In-House Podcast, a series where leaders in in-house marketing and advertising tell their stories. I'm Craig Teper, the co-founder of In.Studio, a digital production consultancy for in-house agencies. We're producing this podcast to create a community where best practices, advice, and hard-learned lessons from our friends and colleagues across the industry can be shared. We start with the most comprehensive picture of the state of the industry that you're likely to find. The results of the Association of National Advertisers' continued rise of the in-house agency survey. The ANA has been publishing this industry-spanning report every 5 years since 2008, and joining us today are its authors, Bill Duggan and Greg Wright. Bill and Greg have their fingers on the pulse of in-house like no one else, and I think you'll be surprised by many of their findings. So now, in their own words, Bill and Greg discuss the data and insights from their most recent survey, completed in 2023.
Hey, I'm Bill Duggan. I'm a longtime A&Aer, 24 years here. I was on the ad agency side prior to the A&A. My role here is fairly diverse. I lead a bunch of what we call our thought leadership initiatives, including work on in-house agencies. My team also programs about a half a dozen industry conferences, including the in-house conference, our financial management conference, multicultural and media, sharing best practices and networking together.
I currently serve as the Senior Vice President of Brand and Media, so I work under Bill very closely with him. And specifically for this group, I handle our in-house agency practice area, working with our committees and conferences that focus on the in-house agency area, as well as of course, our client-side marketer members that focus on that on a day-to-day. And a lot of that is, delivering the insights and value that our members are looking for to understand, how to operate their in-house agency and whether or not like an in-house agency is the right move for them. And so we do that through a number of different initiatives and surveys, including this wonderful continued rise of the in-house agency report.
ANA, the Association of National Advertisers, we are a nonprofit marketing and advertising trade association, founded in 1910. As I like to kid, if you're ever on Jeopardy and they say, where was the ANA founded? Do not say New York, it was Detroit. My educated guess was the automobile industry was coming of age. Our primary members are the client-side marketers, so the Procter & Gamble's, Coca-Cola's, but not only big companies, many medium and smaller ones as well. If you go to the A&A membership directory under A, of course you'll see Allstate, but you'll see AAA of North Carolina, so it's more likely you'll see the smaller and mid-sized companies. We have about 1,000 such members, client-side marketer members, and about 500 or so what we call marketing solution provider members, agencies, media companies. And quickly, I would bundle what we do into 3 buckets, that we have different events that bring members together for learning and networking. As basic as that sounds, learning and networking. They could be big conferences like the In-House Agency Conference or our annual Masters of Marketing Conference that could have hundreds or even thousands of people, or smaller, more intimate committee meetings. Lots of peer-to-peer learning, members learning from one another. Bucket number 1. Bucket number 2 is that we take on issues that may be too big for any individual company to tackle. I'll give 2 examples there. We negotiate the contract for the Screen Actors Guild with our partners, the 4As, the American Association of Advertising Agencies. We do that for the industry. So every 3 years, A&A and the 4As negotiates that contract. Another example from something I did, we released a report on programmatic media buying that had all sorts of tips and insights to help members make their programmatic media spending more efficient and effective. And even the in-house report that we're about to talk about is something that ANA could do, but not any individual member. And then the third bucket is representation at the government level, both the federal and state level. I'll give two examples there. Privacy. So many states have their own privacy law. Probably California is the most well-known. Vermont, Colorado. It's just complicated to deal with individual state privacy laws that we are working with our sister trade associations with the quest, because it's been a quest for national privacy legislation. So that's one example. And then a more local example here in New York, back perhaps it was 10 years ago, Mayor Mike Bloomberg had the observation that there's too many obese New Yorkers. And you may, Craig, remember the proposed law that you couldn't buy a big soft drink. I forget how many ounces, but for the sake of example, 24 ounces, because Bloomberg's hypothesis is too many people drink big soft drinks, everybody gets fat. Sorry to put it that way. And you know what? That's a personal choice. And we worked with our members from companies like Pepsi and Coke to fight that and defeat that. So again, three broad buckets: bring members together for learning and networking, take on issues that may be too big for any individual company, and then representation at the federal and state levels.
The ANA Continued Rise of the In-House Agency Report is a research study that the Association of National Advertisers, ANA, puts out. And it's a result of a survey that we do of our client-side marketer members, really focused around the prevalence of in-house agencies, as well as how they function, the benefits of having an in-house agency, some of the challenges that come with having an in-house agency, and how really the in-house agency works and fits within the overall kind of advertising industry and that landscape. We do this report about every 5 years, and so we'll have another one likely have another one in a couple of years. But that really helps to show kind of the growth of the in-house agency over that time period. I believe the first year we did that was in 2008. So there's been a couple of iterations of that since then, and we've seen really wonderful growth with the in-house agency group from that.
So we started the report in 2008 because there was just a lot of buzz and chatter about marketers taking some of the work that traditionally had been handled by external agencies in-house. I would say an increasing level of conversation about that. And it usually starts with what I would call the low-hanging fruit: collateral materials, point of sale, maybe direct mail pieces, kind of as an entry level and test, and it builds from there. So again, just based on industry conversations, we saw the increase in conversations and just wanted to learn more. And when we did that first survey in 2008, 42% of ANA member companies had an in-house agency, and we said, that's kind of interesting. And over the years, things just continued. When we repeated the survey in 2013, it went from 42% to 58%. It's like, wow, that's pretty significant growth. 5 years later, it went from 58% to 78%, and that was 2018. And then in the most recent report, 2023, it went up to 82%. So that's a pretty wild number, that 82% of client-side marketers have some work handled in-house. And that's the range. There are some companies on the extreme that do everything in-house. That is the extreme. That there are other companies that just do bits and pieces in-house. And in my view, that 82% maybe isn't at the peak yet, but I don't think it'll get higher than 85 to 87%, because there will always be some that, for whatever reason, decide that all the work should be handled externally. But just like companies change agencies for whatever reason, there are companies that have an in-house agency one year and for whatever reason decide not to have it the following year. or there are companies that just decide an in-house agency isn't right for them. So I do believe that the peak will be somewhere in the high 80s.
I think some of the factors that have led to this increase in in-house agencies, specifically at advertisers, has to do with really the landscape of the industry overall. It has become very fractured, if you will. There's a lot of digital programmatic and non-programmatic advertising opportunities, as well as your traditional advertising opportunities, and trying to take advantage of all of those different strategies and to have your work and your brand represented in all of these kind of different venues. You need to have a great and wonderful marketing team. And so some, I think, advertisers have looked at an in-house agency as fulfilling that need. A great example, I think, is Frito-Lay. They have a wonderful in-house agency called D3, and a lot of their in-house agency focuses on social media. And because for their brands, it's very important that they play in the culture space and that they are responding in real time to what's happening in culture, what's happening in pop culture and around the world. And so, in order for their brands to play effectively in that space, they've got an in-house team that really focuses on social media and churning out, creating that wonderful content that helps for them to play in that space. So for a large extent, it's up to the advertiser really where that in-house agency is going to fit, within their kind of overall marketing strategy. But I think that one of the reasons we've seen an increase in those in-house agency and in the penetration is just because of the sheer amount of work that's available now for in-house agencies and all types of players within the industry. That amount of work is just substantially increased.
And I'll build on that answer from Greg, as to why the penetration of in-house agencies is increasing. To me, it's money and speed. So cost efficiencies are almost always the initial reason that work is brought in-house, to save money. Just really as simple as that. And then speed to market as well. One of the areas in particular that we've seen an increase in-housing is social media. So social media, it's important for teams to have quick responses to social media posts that consumers might have or events in the news, and that can be done a lot faster by an internal team versus an external agency who may need to get approval from the internal team before they make a post. Also in cases where legal counsel needs to weigh in on posts beforehand, the in-house team can do that a lot quicker. So again, cost efficiencies or simply money and speed to market. It's a question we ask every year. How has the workload of your in-house agency changed over the past year? 88% said it increased. 88% said it increased. And among that, 67% said it increased a lot. 21% said it increased a little. That's a mind-blowing number, the percentage that say it increased a lot. Like everybody seems to be doing more, more with less. And again, in-house agencies can often do the work faster and cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, again, I think the changing landscape of the advertising industry, certainly the introduction of more content marketing and digital marketing, but also, in-house agencies are maturing. And while they may have started just doing social media or maybe doing, quick and easy content, they're starting to expand their scope. And so they're taking on more strategic work. They're taking on more difficult work, one might say, like, you're doing broadcast quality, commercial production that requires a certain subset of, skills, but also, that's a significant amount of work for an in-house agency to take on. And so I think as in-house agencies are maturing, they're starting to look and see what makes sense to bring in-house, and that's starting to help contribute to the workload. But I think in-house agencies have also just proven their value. And advertisers are relying on them more to turn around content quicker, faster, cheaper, and still have it in line with the brand guidelines.
A reason that workload has increased is media fragmentation and just the sheer number of options. So back in the day, and before A&A, I was an account guy at Gray Advertising. So it would be fairly typical that in the course of a year for a given client, the agency might produce, two TV commercials and three or four print ads. So think about that, six deliverables. These days, with online video, with social video, social media posts, again, traditional media like television, it could be in the hundreds. So I think that's a sheer reason as well. The fragmentation of media, that mass media really is no more. It was, back in the day, you could reach a third of America with one television commercial. That's just impossible now. There's hyper targeting with social media. So the media fragmentation, the desire to be highly targeted, just the result of that is just a higher number of creative pieces are required.
I think most of the folks that take the survey are the creative or operational leader, of their in-house agency. Most of the committee members for our in-house agency group kind of fit within that role. There are certainly some more junior folks, and there may be some more senior. It really just depends on the structure of the in-house agency and how, involved maybe the CMO is or other folks, kind of within the organization. But I would say, the majority of folks that took the survey are more, senior and kind of leading their in-house agency, whether that is on the operations side or creative, or maybe they do both.
Agencies provide a broad range of services in-house. So it usually starts with what I think I said earlier, lower hanging fruit, collateral or promotion materials. That's almost the price of entry. It could be internal company communications, for example, newsletters or presentations, trade show events, social media. We talked about that earlier with the quick turnaround time required with social media. All the way up, there's examples of in-house agencies creating Super Bowl commercials. So that's certainly the exception rather than the rule. But creatively, in-house agencies can do just about everything and anything. And then increasingly, in-house agencies are playing roles in media planning and media buying. Social media for sure. On a more limited basis, there are even some in-house agencies that are buying network television and radio.
We did ask, what is the general overall satisfaction you have, with your in-house team? 87% said that they were, satisfied, and that's incorporating kind of highly satisfied to about, moderately satisfied. 24% said they are completely satisfied with their in-house team. So that's the high end, right? And I would say overall, those are really great indications that the in-house team is doing what they need to do. I know a lot of folks, when we talk about in-house agencies and we kind of commiserate together about the challenges, one of the things they highlight as both a challenge and a positive really is the fact that they get to work so closely with the marketing team at their company. Yeah, they may be just on the other side of the cubicle wall, which could present some other challenges, right? But the fact that they're able to work so closely with the brand lead and with the finance team and legal and everybody else, it really helps to churn that content a lot faster and leads to a higher satisfaction.
Yeah. So advantages of working in-house. So it used to be, in-house was the place where people went at the tail end of their careers. And the knock on in-house was that at an agency, at a traditional ad agency, there was the opportunity to work on various types of businesses, food, travel, tech, whatever the agency had. Where if you were in-house, you were relegated to only working on your company's business. But I think that's changed over time. Traditional ad agencies are tough places to work. I think that there is more career stability on the client side than on the agency side. Agencies, in my view, are not kind to anybody aging, and of course everybody's aging. So, way back when I was in my late 20s, I remember a friend visiting me at the ad agency and said, "Bill, I don't see anybody over 40 here." And I didn't think about it when I was 28, but I tell you, I thought about it more and more as I was approaching 40. There's there's very few people of a certain age at most external agencies, and I think corporate America, client side America, is more open to what I'll call older people. Anybody over 40. I know that's a broad characteristic or characterization of older people, but I think that there's more stability in house, and I think that's attractive at a certain point of your career. And there could be better work-life balance because you're the client. I realize every in-house person is likely answering to an internal client, but it's a different structure when your client is somebody that you work with at your own company. Typically, it's an and in-house and external agencies rather than an or in-house or external agencies. The vast majority of companies that have an in-house agency work with an external agency. I think the number in our report was north of 90%. Typically, a client would go outside to tap into resources that they may not have internally. I think it's almost as simple as that. Thought perspective that they may not have internally, or media buying. One of the benefits of working with an external agency is the clout that external agency can get from bundling media investments with multiple clients to get clout with the media company. So media continues to be an area that companies are more likely to use externally.
Yeah, so the shift towards in-house agencies and its impact on external agencies, there's been a little bit of an impact there, of course. In-house agencies are starting and continue to shift work away from external agencies as they start to bring those capabilities in-house. And again, in-house agencies really run the gamut from being 100%, which is again very rare, 100% in-house, to doing maybe only 5% in-house. So it really varies depending on the advertiser and their particular situation. But there is an impact to those external agencies in that some of that work is being taken from them. I would say overall, though, it's also changing how external agencies work with advertisers. And so the model that a lot of advertisers are now using, there may be one external agency, there may be multiple external agencies, but it's how do they work with the in-house agency in addition to maybe they're also doing strategy or other, more complex capabilities that an in-house agency may not have. So it's really about using that external agency to fill in maybe the gaps where you don't have that expertise in-house. And then I'll also say, the industry has really shifted in how it uses agencies. I think, the days of every advertiser having an AOR are pretty much gone. They still exist, and we could debate what the right model is. But I think because of that shift, you're seeing a lot more project work with agencies, and because of that, there's an opportunity for in-house agencies to either take some of that project work or work with an agency just for that project work.
Yeah, I'm going to build on Greg's answer. It's a tough place these days to be a traditional ad agency, for a number of reasons. That clients are constantly squeezing compensation, and sometimes it's just not fair. So again, back in the day, in my days at Gray Advertising, the typical commission rate was 15%. So that was, all in media and creative, 15%. I'm sure that exists nowhere now. Nowhere that is the continued squeeze to push costs down. Then there's clients that are saying, well, instead of paying you in 60 days, I now need to pay you in 120 days. So increase in payment terms puts pressure on agencies. Greg talked about it quickly, that back in the day, there used to be what was called agency of record, or agencies would be on retainer for clients. Now it's project work or what's called jump balls. So client A has an assignment. There's three agencies. We'll brief all three. All you guys come back with the work, and we'll pick whoever we like the best. So I think all those factors, shorter relationships. You used to hear these tales about so and so has been with their, has a client agency relationship that's 90 years old or 60 years old. That's just incredibly rare these days. So it's a tough place to be an ad agency, and in-housing is just one more arrow that agencies are taking. But the smarter agencies are realizing, like, hey, we need to work with in-house agencies. And maybe it's not so bad that the in-house agency does the collateral work, because you know what, my creative guys don't want to do that anyway. That's crappy work for them. They don't want to work on that. So maybe that's okay. They'll work on the bigger, higher end stuff. But the smarter traditional ad agencies have learned how to work with the in-house agencies. Well, I'm sure there is conflict between in-house and external. I would think a head of an agency, if they could wave a magic wand and in-house agencies would instantly go away, they would wave that wand. But the toothpaste is out of the tube, and in-house agencies are there. And I'll give you one example of where agencies may embrace it. Let's say you're an automotive company. The traditional agency does the advertising that appears on NFL football and wherever else they place it. But then there's all this local advertising that has dealer tags, and there's over 200 markets in the U.S. and likely thousands of dealers that a big automotive company may have. That's likely not work that a high-profile creative at a major ad agency wants to do. And that is work that is more likely handled these days in-house rather than externally.
I think the biggest challenge, in-house agencies face, candidly, is structure and managing their resources. I have said in the past that running an in-house agency is like running a business in a business. If you're running that in-house agency, you still have financial metrics that you need to meet. You have a budget and you have to manage to that budget still. And we all know, how clients are when it comes to creative work, and there's always edits and revisions and they want more, and let's change this from a television commercial to a banner ad, And so it's managing that. And that's a bit harder to do when you're an in-house agency because you are right there next to your client. But managing those resources, scaling efficiently, ensuring that that in-house agency can continue to perform and do the work that it has been doing, but then also to take on that additional work, that has been a big challenge. And I think tied to that is talent. There's a huge competition right now for talent, period, I think, especially in the creative space. And that doesn't change when it comes to in-house agencies. And some of these corporations may not be located in a city that, a lot of creative talent wants to live in. Thankfully, remote work, I think, has alleviated some of those challenges, but it's still an issue. And especially if there are companies that prefer to have people work in their office or have a hybrid schedule, that's still really important. I know there's a number of in-house agencies that move their offices to Chicago, for example. Maybe they were somewhere else in the Midwest, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, but they said, we're going to put our in-house agency office in Chicago because that's going to attract the right talent. And there's other instances where in-house agencies have some really wonderful relationships with local colleges and local universities where they can source some of that great creative talent coming right out of college. Well, I think, dealing with kind of the conflict and challenges about, working with your clients, and how do you manage the billing, especially when it comes to, revisions. It just depends on how the in-house agency is set up. I believe that, we asked that question around billing in the report, and a vast majority of respondents are set up as a cost center, right? So there's not necessarily any kind of formal billing maybe going back and forth, but they're keeping track of those costs. Unfortunately for them, right, when the CFO looks at it, they're going to look at their budget as a loss, and that's just the way kind of accounting works in that regard. But there are other ways to set up an in-house agency. Some use a chargeback method where they get estimates up in advance, and they figure out how much it's going to cost, and then they charge those costs back to that brand, if you will, when they complete those projects. There's a couple different ways you can set up an in-house agency in that regard, but ultimately a lot, I think, find cost centers are the most effective way to do it because it requires less management, I would say.
To me, the survey, it was just a reaffirmation of what we learned in the survey 5 years earlier, in the survey 5 years before that. Like so much of it was incredibly consistent. Of course, we saw in-house penetration go up, but we saw things like the biggest challenges were the same, managing workflow, having increased projects, working with an external agency, the percent doing that was about the same. The workload between internal and external agencies was about the same. So to me, that was fairly good news that there weren't really dramatic changes, but I do feel media is one change that we've seen that we'll continue to see.
Yeah, I think, in the report we didn't specifically talk about AI, I don't believe, and especially, I mean, certainly has been the hottest topic, over the last year plus. I think what we're seeing with in-house agencies right now and their adoption of AI is more on what I'm going to say the process side. So it's more about how do we, streamline our workflows? How do we analyze this data better and faster? Can we create this content in a more effective way? Can we find the content that we've already created in a better way, with whether it's a digital asset management program or so on? And there's certainly a lot of platforms and tools and services out there that have incorporated AI into their management of projects and so on. And so I think that's where we see a lot of in-house agencies using AI. On the other side, the creative side or the Gen AI side, I think it just depends on that advertiser and how open they are to AI. Certainly not every advertiser is okay with generative AI, but we are seeing some in-house agencies jump right in and they're incorporating AI or generative AI into their creative. Maybe it's just for, brainstorming and coming up with, ideas. But to some extent, I think some in-house agencies are also going a bit deeper and using generative AI for their creative.
Here's what I think is incredibly interesting. We fielded this last survey in February and March in 2023. So not all that long ago, like a year and a half. We didn't ask any questions about AI. So why was that? Like the AI wave really started mid 2023 and since then. And now, like I couldn't imagine us fielding a survey to in-house agencies without asking about AI, but it just shows how quickly this thing has progressed.
I would say top conclusions from our survey, from my perspective at least. I think number one, in-house agencies are mainstream. They're not going to go away. The use of them and how many advertisers use them, I think will certainly fluctuate. But I think that's a mainstay part of the industry. We need to learn how to work better with in-house agencies and external agencies and all the other different partners that are part of this giant advertising landscape. So I'd say that's a major conclusion there. I think a second conclusion for me is we're really seeing in-house agencies mature and growing beyond just doing quick and simple work. They're doing really stellar award-winning creative results driving work. And we see that we launched a couple of years ago. We launched the In-House Excellence Awards, a program as part of the ANA to award advertisers, in-house agencies that are doing really wonderful creative work. And it's mind-boggling how wonderful some of this work is. I mean, it rivals work that, would have been done, 20, 30 years ago by just the top agencies. And so we're really seeing, I think, that creativeness and even the strategy is starting to build more as those in-house agencies mature.
When we started our work on in-house agencies, we called in-housing a trend. It's no longer a trend. It's here to stay. In-housing is firmly entrenched. Greg talked about it a little bit, that in-house agencies are increasingly being held to the same standards as external agencies. It used to be the old thing, fast, cheap, good. Pick two. In-house, that was easy, fast and cheap. It's the reasons people start in-house agencies, to save money and to do things faster. But they also want to do good work, and increasingly in-house agencies are being held to that same standard. And then it's a battle for talent. In-housing provides, in-house agencies, it's probably 2/3 filled with creative people. It provides other opportunities, other options for creative people, and in-house agencies are competing for that talent with other in-house agencies, as well as traditional agencies. And Greg touched upon it quickly earlier. The remote workplace means that competition is even fiercer, because if you work, wherever in the middle of America, you could, why couldn't you work for an in-house agency in Boston or Atlanta? And you likely could.
Well, I think the future of in-house agencies will see, similarly, I agree totally, a departure from that focus on cost and the focus on cost savings. I think we'll see that departure. I think we'll see more on the end of, how to work better with your external agencies. There's going to be a lot more focus on this kind of how all of these individual pieces work together. I think related to in-house agencies, we've seen an increase in the industry of marketing operations. And I think that when you encompass in-house agencies within this kind of marketing operations role, you start to see how the marketing organization really functions and works with all these different kind of disparate groups, including your external agencies. So I think that's something that we're going to see in the future, is kind of a more comprehensive, methodical way that the marketing organization is structured, inclusive of the in-house agency, to kind of get those process efficiencies in place.
So here's my wish for the future. Right now, when we ask, what are the top KPIs used to assess the effectiveness of your in-house agency, the top KPI is cost savings. I find that very sad because that would never ever be the top KPI for a traditional agency. The cheapest agency? No, of course not. So right now, for in-housing, it's cost savings. I would hope the future would be, while savings would always be somewhat important, it can't be the most important. It's business performance. How well the advertising or how well the work has driven the business. So that is my hope for the future, that business performance, and I predict that will be the case when we do the next survey in 2028. I guess it is that business performance will outweigh cost savings.
I'd like to thank Bill and Greg for taking the time to walk us through the report, and can't wait to see what they have to share when they next publish in 2028. To read the report yourself or to learn more about the ANA, please visit their website at ana.net. And if you're interested in expanding your own in-house capabilities, reach out to us at In.Studio. We're on the web at weareinstudio.com. We have a great group of in-house team leaders and creatives coming up in future episodes. Next time, Mandy Janicki. She's the head of the creative studio team at UL Solutions, and she goes deep on the internal processes of their full-service in-house agency. Until next time.